Okay, so a little orientation about how to build a crankbait. It is surprisingly quick and easy with my lure crankbait building kit. The mold itself is built of silicone rubber and it can be separated and put back together. So the first step in building a crankbait is to get your measuring cups properly marked, one for side A and one for side B, because you will receive two different casting resins. When they mix together, they solidify to form a plastic that has been modified to work well with fishing lures. And I just take a Sharpie and write A on the back side of one and B on the other side of one. Now these resins are not at a 1-to-1 ratio. In fact, it is 3.5 milliliters for part A and 5 milliliters for part B. So what I'll do is I'll find the 5 milliliter mark and I'll just take a Sharpie and mark it at 5 milliliters. And if you don't like the mark, wipe it off and do it again. Mark that at 5 milliliters. Now I'll take side A and mark it at 3.5 milliliters. And then, before you mix part A and part B, you always want to remember to set up your mold. And you'll get a packet of 90 hook eyelets here, or just eyelets. Dump out a few of them. And there is 3 posts, short little posts, that these will fit tightly over. One at the front, one in the middle, and then one at the tail end. And you'll also be receiving 30 crankbait lips, which are made of transparent polycarbonate plastic, which is nice and strong. And you simply put it into the slit, make sure it's down nice and tight, and then from there you just got to close up the mold, make sure all the buttons are together, and if you want you can even hold it up to the light to make sure that your hook eyelets stayed in place. And then you're ready to do your mixture of part A and part B. Okay, so part B requires vigorous shaking for 20 to 30 seconds. And you can feel it when it starts to shake. So I'll just count 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, 4 1000, 29 1000, 30 1000. And then I will pour it in to the cup. So I'm going to pour 5 milliliters of part B into the measuring cup, and I'm going to ignore any bubbles. So you want to go up to the line, and actually I went slightly beyond it. Part A does not require shaking. You can just open it up and pour it in to your mark at 3.5 milliliters. Again, it's better to go a little over than a little under. So when it comes to the casting resin, you want to minimize the amount of time that the bottles are spent open, and when you do close them up, you want to close them up nice and tight. But with with resin A, you have to really rub down the top of it, otherwise the lid will get stuck on there. Doesn't seem to be a problem for resin B, but for resin A, you gotta rub off any residue or it'll get stuck. So now I'll just dump those simultaneously into my mixing cup and make sure I get as much out as I can. About 15 to 20 seconds. So 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, 13 1000, 14 1000, 15 1000. And a caution about this residue: if you get it on clothing, it's not coming off. Scissors is the only thing that'll take it out. So be very careful not to get it on your clothing or wear old clothing when you do this. Then from there, it's just a question of dumping your liquid casting resin into the funnel of the mold. So I'll dump it in there, and if you measured it out correctly, you should have just barely enough to fill it. I have just a little bit left over hanging out in the funnel. That's about how much extra you should be left with. So at this point, you just need to wait for 10 to 15 minutes for the resin to harden. To clean out your measuring cups, just take a paper towel, roll it up, shove it down in to the measuring flask, shove it in as tightly as you can get it, and then just spin it around. Times. You should do another cleaning right before you use them in the same way, and then you can just throw away the paper towel. It is non-toxic. So it's been about 10 to 15 minutes, so all you have to do is pull the mold apart. Because it's flexible and the bait is hard, it's easy to get out, and you got to break off all the flashings, so you want to have a garbage can handy. So first of all, I break off the excess funnel piece, then I break off the other pieces of flashing, which is quick and easy to do. Just want to make sure you do it over a garbage can so you don't get in trouble with your wife. And then I just go along it with my fingernail along the central line to smooth it out, but you can use a knife or a putty stick or whatever. So now it's all ready to have the stickers placed on it. So now that we have our fully formed crankbait body, we just have to put the decals on. And putting the top decal on, you always want to pull it from the bottom up. Is probably the only hard part of making a crankbait. You got to get it perfectly centered right there, starting at that front eyelet, and then just make sure the spine stays centered all the way down. That looks like it's pretty close. So then I'll just fold down the flaps. I like to fold down the eye flaps first, get them down, and then fold down the rest. And it takes a little practice, but you'll get good at putting those on. Then it's just a question of putting on the side stickers and selecting which ones you want. I've chosen to use the pattern I used that caught a 5-pound brown trout on a overfished stretch of river that isn't known for catching large trout. So the key to putting the side stickers on is to ignore the top sticker and follow the bottom contour of the lure with the bottom of the sticker. So make those two parallel to each other. So I'm ignoring the top sticker and I'm just making the side sticker parallel to the belly of the fish. Then I put those on, and then I would just do the same for the other side. And now I will show you how to put the hooks on. So now we put the self-adhesive decals crankbait body, and putting the treble hooks on is easy thanks to the easy to use split rings. I just put the eye of the treble hook onto the extension, then I run the extension through the eyelet and push it on like this, maneuver it around. Again, you may have to use your fingernail to get that final piece through. And you just pull up and down. If that doesn't work, do it again. Pull up and down and it should break right off. And then you'll just do the same thing for the second hook. So you're welcome to use a swivel, but as with other crankbait, if you use a swivel, you're going to increase the number of tangles that you get in the lure. So I like to tie them directly on just using a fisherman's knot, but you can't tie it, you can't cinch it down tightly onto that leading eyelet. You need to leave just a little loop right there, otherwise it will mess up the action. So lead wire comes with the crankbait building kit. Lead is toxic, so make sure you wash your hands after using it and keep it out of the reach of children. The purpose of this lead wire is so that you can customize both the action and the running depth of a crankbait. Now if I want to make a wilder, more pronounced wiggle, I would take lead wire and I would wrap it around the bottom half of the trailing split ring. And of course it depends on how much wire you wrap around it, will depend on how pronounced the effect is. So it doesn't have to be pretty. So this lure would produce deeper diving depth, deeper running depth, and it would produce a more pronounced wiggle and a more erratic wiggle. So now I've wrapped lead wire around both the trailing treble hook, well, the trailing split ring and the leading split ring, and this results in a quicker, narrower wiggle that is often used with a fast retrieve. It also results in a deeper diving depth. Now I've wrapped just the leading split ring with lead. Now this actually results in a more regular wiggle. Now you may want to use this in swift river currents where the current is pushing the bait over on its side. Also it's used if you want to keep the same action but have a deeper running depth. And again, you can titrate, you can use as much lead or as little lead as you want to get different effects. Okay, so I've used split shot sinkers to add extra weight, and I've put them a few feet above the crankbait. Now this is often used for trolling to get a crankbait down to a deeper depth, but you can also use it for casting. And it really doesn't affect the action of the bait, it just brings it down to a deeper running depth. You can actually mold lead directly into the crankbait itself. Now depending on the position of the lead and the quantity of lead, you'll get a different type of action and a different running depth. So one interesting idea I've thought of is by molding lead directly into the crankbait itself, you might be able to produce a lopsided effect that mimics an injured minnow. It is possible to make a floating topwater bait, and that is because if you add a tiny quantity of water to the resin, it will cause a little bit of foaming, and that slight amount of foaming will cause the bait to float. So you can also produce a floating topwater bait. The way you do that is you take a number 2 split ring, which is a smaller split ring, dip it in water, and you'll get a very consistent amount of water that pools up on the split ring. Then you just take the split ring, stir it around in your solution, dry off the split ring if you intend to salvage it, and then from there you just pour it into the mold. So as far as producing a floating topwater crankbait, I would like to be able to tell you that a given amount of water will always produce a given amount of foaming and therefore a given amount of flotation for your crankbait. However, that is not the case because the resin will tend to absorb water over time. Just in the small amount of time you have the cap off, it will absorb humidity from the air. Therefore, an older resin that has been used more will require less added water to achieve a given amount of foaming. So if you have brand new casting resin, then you may have to add 5, maybe even 6 split rings worth of water to the resin to get a desired amount of foaming. However, over time that number will go down, and eventually you may need to add only 1 split ring worth of water to the resin to get a desired amount of foaming.